Hello and welcome to Push Your Glasses Up. I'm Mikey. I'm joined once again today by our old co-host Reena to talk about Avatar: The Way of Water. Follow up the cram sesh we did the other day. If you haven't seen that one, go check it out. Hey, real quick, if you enjoy these videos, please like them and subscribe to the channel. It helps me out a great deal. There is also the RSS feed if you're more interested in the audio-only version of this podcast. Now let's talk about Avatar: The Way of Water. Hey, Reena, welcome back.
Thanks. I'm back again. It's nice to hang out with you on these more regularly.
I mean, we used to do it a lot more often, but it's good that there's still certain movies that can get us to force a hangout session. We are following up 2009's Avatar today with Avatar: The Way of Water. So generally speaking, before we get into too many spoilers, although I think this movie doesn't really have, there's like one spoiler, I would say, that happens towards the end of the movie. Otherwise, it's a kind of unspoilerable movie. But yeah, what did you think about Avatar: The Way of Water?
It's kind of like the most beautiful bad movie I've ever seen.
Really?
Like, okay, remember when I used to have,
are you saying bad or just not that like not an overly plotty movie?
I'll take it back. The most visually stunning, poorly written movie I've ever seen.
I would disagree, but you continue on.
Well, I mean, it's kind of the same format as the last one, right? And I struggle with plot holes, but that said, okay, on my scale of, remember I was like, is it a Saturday night movie, is it a Sunday afternoon movie? I think it's a great Sunday afternoon movie, where I would pay attention to the key parts, but I don't really need to follow along.
Yeah, I personally, I don't think that there is anything that's too overly detailed with this movie that you would have to worry about that. So I think it's kind of part of its point is to not have to worry about that. It's even James Cameron was like, whatever, go to the bathroom. If it's a long movie, you'll come back again and see it another time. It's fine. I could fold laundry and be fine, and you'll still following the story. And that's, I think that is a thing that is sort of, it's an opposition of what we've been trained in modern blockbusters recently, which is to get in the mind frame of spoilers and heavy plot points and stuff like that. And that's not really these movies. And the first one doesn't really have any of that either. I think that these movies are just that, like we were saying in the last episode, a more generalized idea as opposed to it's not Michael Clayton. We don't have to worry about if we're gonna miss a certain line that gives away everything in this way. This is just good guys, bad guys. We like the environment. That's this movie. No, for sure. Yeah, and I think to your point, it's just meant to be. It's meant to be enjoyed, and there's some things that make you think, but nothing so provocative or extreme or it's just pure entertainment. That said, the visual aspect of it I don't want to understate, because it's gorgeous. Even though I can be oh, it's not the best written film, so beautiful, and that means a lot. That's very enjoyable to me. Let me start over even on my own, because I think I was only replying to you at that point. I like this movie better than the first movie. I think it does. I mean, it is, like you were saying, it almost is just the same movie in a way, where it is, instead of just Jake Sully going into the culture of the tribe, it is the whole family coming from their tribe into another tribe. That's the main difference outside of air versus water. Right. But I think that on a visual scale, obviously, you have 13 years of technical know-how progress made. So it's obviously like it's stunning. It's the best looking movie I've ever seen. It outdoes like as everything James Cameron was bragging about, like outdoing like Thanos and stuff. Yeah, it does. But also part of that is because Marvel is on the cycle of like churn and burn at this point, and they don't have the time afforded to them to be able to like
and
up
no
the
one
ante.
No one does water movies like James Cameron.
Yeah. He's always going to improve on that every single time. But like, I actually think that this is better written than the first movie. The dialogue is still subpar, but that's not what I'm really talking about. I'm just talking about like the way that they're able to convey the events happening, the way that they're able to convey the emotion coming through those events. I think that this is much better in terms of the writing than the first movie, especially with the fact that like when you figure out that this is written by like some of the Planet of the Apes writers, you can feel that come through. Where like, I think the Planet of the Apes movies, the first one is the most, or the modern Planet of the Apes movies, I should specify, I guess. But like Rise of the Planet of the Apes is very much that like blockbuster, a lot of things going on. And then they kind of brought it down to smaller confrontations and smaller events in the next two movies. And I think that that's sort of what this movie does. Is it's a grand scale movie. This is an epic movie. Like, it's huge. But they do a good job of making it just about a few people instead of this like huge world thing. And yeah, there's stuff that, you know, like Jake checking to see if his son was killed at the beginning of the movie. It just rolls over the other person from the tribe. And it's like, oh, thank God, that's not my son. Fuck them. And he goes to his son. Like there's stuff like that. But that is sort of like with James Cameron, that's sort of the way it is a lot of the time. Like you have stuff with like going back to like Terminator 2, even like that kind of thing happens. You're focused on the main characters, and the main characters are also focused on the main characters. So, but yeah, I think it is a, you know, average movie in terms of like if you're trying to judge it on a film, but I think it is one of the best examples of a blockbuster that you have to see at the theater.
I think it's a perfect Christmas Day movie.
Yeah.
Not too much like going on. If you had a busy morning,
depending,
you can kind of just
depending on the age of your kids.
True. It is a very long movie.
I went to a 9 p.m. showing of this 3 hour and 12-minute movie, which had trailers in front of it. So, and even only 3 trailers makes it closer to almost, you know, 3 hours, 30 minutes, 3 hours, 35 minutes. Someone decided to bring their 3-year-old to my screening at 9 p.m. that wasn't getting out until almost 1 a.m. That was fun.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
As a cool auntie who's around children, that's a lot.
In 3D and high frame rate.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, my niece is 4, my nephew's 2, and I've never seen like past the middle of Trolls World Tour. Like that was it. I've seen the beginning, and I've seen when they get to the country trolls, and then I'm out.
And
then
on top of that, if you were bringing them to a movie theater, probably a matinee. That's just kind of the way you bring kids into the situation.
Like 8:30 is rough for them. 8:30 is like an all-nighter.
Yeah, it was a brutal first 40 minutes of the person not even bringing the kid out of the theater when they were like crying and stuff. It was nuts. But yeah, like I think it's a stellar example of like not every movie needs to break you down with like extremely clever things in the writing. I think it is just, it's doing its job in the writing, and it, you know, the other stuff makes up for what may be missing from that. Because like we said in the last movie, it's been a long time. They have to reintroduce us to this world a little bit. And so they're kind of gonna go again with that little bit more generic aspect of it. And I think that's fine, because there's a lot to grasp in this world again. So yeah.
We want to get into spoilers now? Do we want to get into it?
Yeah. Like I said, there's not a ton to spoil, but
spoilers.
A character dies, and I think that's a spoiler.
But I feel like you kind of know
you can still see it coming. It is in the generic formula of this movie for sure. But yeah, you started out, because I'm going to time code it.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, we pick up with, Jake Sully has had a whole bunch of kids with Neytiri, and so they're just living their lives. He is a Sully.
He is an Irishman.
It makes total incomplete sense. He's sort of low-key training him because he was a Marine and he's an army dad. So that everything all checks out.
I know a lot of those Boston families. Yeah. It's yeah.
One thing that does make sense is that the Sky People come back, which obviously we knew when they kicked them out at the end of the first movie that they weren't going to be oh shucks, I guess we're done here.
And it's also what is what's the other that Pandora lives in peace, generally speaking, amongst the tribes. They don't necessarily get along and get together all the time or whatever, but it's a generally peaceful moon, I guess, not a planet, moon.
It's like Endor.
Yeah, and so it's this thing where, yes, we knew that was going to happen, but what else would the villain be? Kind of is how I think about it. Yeah.
So we knew that was coming, and again, it was painful to watch them destroy shit all over again, because that's a part that kind of hurt my heart. I can only watch so many creatures and indigenous folks get kicked out of their homes and murder faced by people, and between the military might and capitalism. So that's a lot, but I'm glad that was only a short period of time, and I'm glad that they have since learned, they know the ways of the Sky People because they're led by a former one, and they have guns now. And they're equipped, and they have military strategy, and they are in a way better defensive position to handle this than in the first movie. So good for them. I like the progress in that sense.
And this is where we got the surprise appearance of Edie Falco.
Yes,
surprised the hell out of me. Yeah, I didn't know this movie came out. Yeah,
because it was would she film it 4 years ago or something ridiculous like that?
Which isn't that. I mean, I guess for her because she's not used to it, but that's not that crazy.
I know, but it's just kind of funny to think about.
Because even the movies that came out mid-pandemic, because they came out mid-pandemic, were filmed 3 to 4 years prior. So it's but whatever. With the whole transitioning of locations after we get through this initial part where they are once again attacking the locals, let's say. I like the way that they do this, where Jake is trying to actually live a different life outside. He's doing the insurgency thing, right? Where he's trying to shut down the multiple things. But in general, all of that happens. And then his kids, who this movie is about the kids more than anything. So I'm sure we'll, as we get to the new location, we will get into more about the kids, because that's where it really breaks through. But the another one of the quote unquote generic things about this movie is it is about just family dynamic, and how being too strict of a father, or too rambunctious of a kid, and too ahead of yourself as a kid can get in the way of,
or being a middle child.
Yeah,
how hard it is to be a middle child.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that stuff. Yeah,
baby's cute. We bring the baby along. Took is very cute, and then the oldest one is the responsible one. Hi, shout out to the oldest siblings, and doing what they need to do. And then although I will say, Kiri who is sort of a weird hybrid who's adopted because she was born from
She's
Grace's
the actual
avatar.
chosen one in the franchise. Yeah.
Yes, but I was a little like Jesus-y, not to like.
I mean,
be
that's
blasphemous
a
before
chosen one
Christmas.
story. That's the chosen one story. That's Anakin. Like that's Superman.
The only thing I didn't like was that it was still Sigourney Weaver, and I couldn't get past that I'm supposed to be looking at like basically a teenage girl.
Oh,
with
and not
the voice
even
of Sigourney,
like 11-year-old really for her, kind of, but like
right?
yeah.
But voiced by Sigourney Weaver. I think that was a little like too on the nose.
Yeah, that
because it would come through in and out, right? Like sometimes she would sound like a child, and other times I'm like, it's definitely still Grace.
Yeah, well, the actual tonality of her voice was always too deep, and it was a little distracting. The way she delivered lines and like enunciation, I think, came through well as like a younger person trying to kind of find themselves. I think that worked, but the tonality of her voice, yeah, it was always a little too deep and was a little bit distracting. I think the best way to do it probably would have been to mocap her doing the performance and then have a younger person voice it in ADR. But you could lose something in that, and it's also like Cameron has his mind set on something, they're gonna do it, and it's like I think it's
maybe he shouldn't have killed her off in the first movie.
I think it works, but it can be distracting. And it could be better, but I don't think it's like a detriment, because I do think Sigourney Weaver still brings the gravitas of that role forward. So like that is something that could, I could see being lost in doing that. But I think in some of the...
I'm sorry, my brain just went Feliz Gravitas.
Evergreen content. But yeah, the things that work the best with her, I think, are the quiet moments, where, because I don't think she's able to play panicked kid as well, but she can play those quiet moments where she's talking about feeling AWA with Jake, and the line delivery in the movie is even better than it is in the trailer, where she said, because in the trailer you think she's talking about Grace, and she's talking about AWA, where she says that it feels mighty. And it's like, just the way that comes across is really, really, really good. And unfortunately, in some of the more like, I don't know how to put it, like athletic moments, like it's not as strong of a believability with that age discrepancy, I guess.
That was like the only distracting thing. And then we have like their other adopted kid of Spider, who is an interesting character.
Interesting concept for a character.
But I guess it makes sense that you couldn't put a baby in cryo. That makes total sense.
Yeah. I'm totally okay with the concept of this character. I think that it didn't play out on screen as well as they were hoping. I think that he does a good job with like the more gymnastic aspect of it, of like the way he lands when he bounces is like a little bit on his like softening his landing and whatever. I think that stuff, this person did a decent job. I don't think they're that talented of an actor for the role to be the like basically the one human on screen for most of this movie. Just didn't carry it all that well, unfortunately. But it is like, that's something James Cameron does, and he hires sort of unknown kids to do stuff, and that like in a way that comes across on the two sons as well. With what are they, Natayam and Loak. I think that at first it comes across the same way as Spider, where it's like, this doesn't seem like they're the best in the roles, but I think that that's actually that they are written better that way. Because they are written as Jake's meathead kids, as opposed to Spider being, young Tarzan more so, which, I can see why they would want to go with that, because it is, the kid grows up surrounded by that culture, wants to be embraced by that culture. It is what it is. I just don't think Spider works as well in the performance as the others do.
Well, also, I mean, he was raised by scientists, so I can't imagine that they were when we know who they were, they're not the most like personable people. So like he's kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place.
The guy from Grandma's Boy isn't the most personal.
I mean, Norm's pretty good, but like, generally speaking.
Norm's back for 3 minutes of screen time this time.
Yep.
Yeah, I other than my like issues with some of that performance stuff, I really like what they did with the kids here and how they changed the focus to be really more about them. Like I think that, Zoe Saldana can be a little bit wasted in it because of that, where she's just kind of like scared mom a lot of the time. But I also appreciate that, like, the story being told is this kid's story, like, it's particularly the younger son's story and Kiri's story. And so we get a lot more focus on them. And when there's this weird thing where, like, I think that Avatar, the first one, is just too long because it is still structured like a movie. Where this is not, it really doesn't, it's still 3 acts, but it's not really structured as, act 1, act 2, act 3. It's just kind of like, okay, here's this section, here's this section, here's this section. And once it takes place in a shorter period of time, I think. Or it feels like it does, as opposed to what we talked about the last one being like, what is happening? It's where from the moment that Jake meets Neytiri till the end of the movie is like almost a year. This is, I would say, more like 6 months and under, despite the fact that we still don't really have like a really good idea of that. We'll see once more details decide to come out. But the beginning of this movie is necessary setup. That's the one little part that I think goes too long, that where I felt the runtime too much early on. Because once they do the whole like, okay, we need to leave and go on the run and find a safer place and go into hiding, I think that's where the movie actually becomes a movie. It's more of like a 2-act movie at that point. And that whole section where they're just like learning this new thing, just like the last movie, is like where a lot of my favorite stuff was. Just because when they learn how to be free divers. Well, you're sitting with the characters, like you're allowing the characters to like feel like people, as opposed to just rush. And the last movie did that too, and that's the best stuff in that movie. So it's like, I think James Cameron knows what he's doing. It's just a matter of like, maybe we didn't need to sit for like 35 minutes at the beginning of this movie. We could have just showed it as like, okay, here's the family, here's the attack, now they're leaving, in like 10 minutes. Just because like the rest of the movie is so much more interesting and so much more exciting, because it's like that first part, like we know the setup is gonna be that. So yeah. It could have just started where they, oh shit, they came back. Yeah. Oh, okay. Oh, this is a problem. Yeah, and we didn't, like I said, they needed to reestablish everything, right? So I get why they did the voiceover narration on that, but we could have done that in a more organic way, where they could have just shown an attack of them coming back, and then we have them introduced in like actual in-person dialogue of like saying the name of a kid as they're flying, to be like, hey, we'll be there. Like when Took, the youngest one, says like, are we there yet? In like Took, I think is the most like organically real character, and is like minimal dialogue, but like I think that she has the most kind of believable child aspect to her. And so like in those moments, it could have been like, oh, we'll be there soon, Tuck. Like that's where you could have just naturally done it. So it is a little, hand-holdy with some of that. But again, I understand why they have to do that.
Well, that and like how many times do the kids get captured? Like there's like
Yeah, the kids never really learn a lesson.
So like
until
we
it's
start
too
like
late.
if we're talking about the beginning of the movie, and I guess we haven't even brought up what's his name? The colonel being reintroduced.
Quaritch
Who was
2.0.
like who was one of my least favorite characters in the first one. So super psyched to see him.
Least favorite in the fact that you don't want to like you don't care about them, but like they're a perfect villain where it's just like, yeah, this is a bad guy and I can't wait to see him get fucked up.
Yeah, and he did, and that was very satisfying. And then he's back, and you know now they're using the avatar bodies.
I do think that they do a better job at making him a slightly more interesting character this time around. Mm-hmm. They give him that little bit of moral choice, which makes him a little bit less of a stereotype. But
I mean, maybe it's because he died. So this is the second round. But like,
I think it's also it's the world building stuff that we talked about last time with like the neural network stuff where they just kind of like glanced over it, where it's like, I think they're actually doing a little bit better of a job of like letting some of those ideas come through, where it's like, it's not cloning. It's not a new avatar system. Like they're actually downloading the memories and stuff. And I think that actually going with that, yes, they did do an exposition dump for that again. But I think that they're doing a better job exploring that kind of stuff than they did in the first movie, because like that's where the moral choice actually comes from. So, yeah.
So, yeah, like that he was back, and, you know, I liked they returned to the lab, and it was interesting to see him see his own dead body, right? Yeah. And
having his Hamlet moment.
So that part I thought was cool, but like I felt like the kids just kept getting captured, and I'm like, come on, of all like how many times, and even like,
stop bringing the youngest one,
right? Like this is not good. And then we fast forward to like later in the movie, and then they're basically like switching out who's handcuffed to the ship, and it's just like, okay, come on, guys.
But that did bring the funniest line in the whole movie, which is, oh, I can't believe I'm tied up again. Like Took is the funniest character in this whole movie, and it's.
And I was like, my thoughts exactly. Okay, so, you know, we know that they're being pursued now. This is like a revenge plot. They know that he's the leader of the insurgency, but they're already mad about everything that happened, like however many years ago. So,
yeah, I think it is like 16 years later.
This elite squad is hyper-focused on taking out Jake Sully for everything that he did. Because once a Marine, always a Marine, unless you become a Navi and then you're not anymore. I don't know. There are rules.
Well, I think that was just a new mission thing that they were doing, because like it means they don't need to wear the masks. It means they don't, you know, they. There are weird correlations with like
they were tattooed. Like, come on, they have like full sleeves, just so you know that they're like the military ones.
I assume that that's them just having their personalities come through, because like,
do they have a tattoo artist on board in cryo?
Well, no, they trained off world already, so they were alive for a few years, and because they are the same people, they're like, yeah, I want my same tattoos back.
But he just woke up there and he was like, what the hell is going on? And then he has the whole like, oh my God, I'm in a blue body. Right.
I think that, yes, he could have had tattoos done on the ship. The rest of them, though, were already there like, hey. This, I know you're new here, but we're not new here. So the rest of them already like were existing for a while. But there are those correlation aspects that like don't really add up, where, you know, yeah, they're in the forest and the forest recognizes them. Okay, why did the forest not recognize Jake in the last movie? Like, so it's
and like
it's a little bit.
The animals were all still dangerous.
Yeah,
like,
so it is.
Even if you were.
Yeah, and granted, you can kind of write that away with like, these technically aren't avatars. Jake was an avatar. These technically aren't, because they have the person's actual like DNA and memories like put into them a little bit more
like what
than
Jake
the other
is
process.
Now.
Right, exactly. Except it was done through science instead of faith. So it's I think that you can write that away a little bit, but it is a little in the moment, like, okay, but why? Like, you know, that's, yeah.
Like, why, if they're like in a helicopter, did the Banshees go, oh no, you're cool?
Just do one of these. Got you.
So there's some of that, but like, you know, so they leave, they're in the kind of the same sort of mountain forest area as we see in the last movie, and then they move off to this, like, the island tribes, which is like the Caribbean, and it's beautiful, and the water's all tropical.
Well,
and
it's more, it's
reefs and things, and
it's more like Polynesian. It's more like Pacific, because it's like clearly the culture is more like Maori and stuff. So yeah,
but it's like, and with the tattoos are very reminiscent of like Polynesian tattoos, and you know, there's beautiful coral reefs and creatures and things.
This is where it's the most stunning. The whole, like, weirdly enough, like the last movie, the jungle is where it is the most stunning, specifically at night. And like, to flip that, they were like, no. Daytime at this beach is gonna blow you away. And it does. It's unbelievable.
I do like how the water tribes are a little bit different in their adaptations when we think about how important this world is and how people are connected to it. And since they are so connected to the water, they have like paddle tails.
They
like
got that thick tail. Yeah,
I know. I had a paddle-tailed newt named Alphonse for 10 years. He had a very similar tail, and it's very powerful. They had like webbed fingers. They were a little bit lighter, so they blended in better with like the color of the water.
Yep.
And you know, I liked that those were some that was like kind of a surprise that those differences were there. But that was cool, and I love the training. We'll call it the training montage, where they're learning how to free dive and like living their lives, and then, you know, the kids are having weird rivalry asshole things because we gotta put higher
and higher from Wet Hot American Summer behind
it. Like teenage boys having, you know, doing their thing. But like, I would say one of the best parts about this was like the creatures, where I feel like we got to spend a lot more time in knowing them as individuals and not just like decoration.
None of this world, like Pandora 1 is just like, wow, I can't believe they created this CG world. This all feels like it just exists until you put a human on screen. Then it like kind of gets wishy-washy. But like, without having to worry about that compositing, this world is like, it's what people think they saw in the last movie. It's unbelievable.
And then, I mean, you know, skipping ahead, one of the biggest things was introduction of like, you know, like a whole species of animal that's like an important character. Or so, like the Banshees were, but they were like kind of a vehicle of transportation more so than like,
and this movie has the Elu, which is essentially a water banshee, and then the Skimwings, which is, I guess, the red one from the last movie almost. So yeah, it's
But the space whales, the Tulkun, were really kind of the stars of the show.
That's my favorite part. Yeah,
I love a good space whale. And then,
well, they're not really space whales. They just swim in water.
And then, you know, like how there is the outcast one. You know, what was his name? Ayakun or something like that. Yeah. And then he really bonded with Loek, who is kind of the middle child, who's the struggle bus, who's kind of the problem child.
And also is like the outcast child or character in this movie.
Who like ends up being more than just I've bonded with this creature, because he ended up being clutch.
Yeah.
in the final battle. But I had a really hard time during like the whaling part of the movie, because it was like this is one area where they're really detailed and maybe like a little too detailed, and it was like giving me like flashbacks of like Blackfish and shit that we really do that's just awful, and mixing it up with like, you know, elephant hunts and other where we just murder animals for like one very small thing and dump them.
Yeah.
And I was there with Matthew, and I kept like squeezing his arm because I was like, I don't want to see these non-existent animals.
I think
murdered.
Well, that's the thing, is I think that like this whole segment of the movie is my favorite part of the movie, because we get to live with the characters, and that means we also get to live with these whales as well, which is just like, yeah, like people are gonna make fun of the fact that it's like all of a sudden captions show up, right, for an animal that's not speaking a language that we would take as a language, but like they're so connected with the main characters of the movie that like, yeah, they understand each other. Like, yeah, the caption is in papyrus, ha 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 ha. But like, it is some of the best emotional stuff in this movie, because it's like James Cameron is able to do this thing where like he can be very sincere about weird things, and it allows you to actually like believe it can happen. And we already have this whole established lore of this universe where like these characters are connected to the flora and fauna and even like weather of this world. Like they are part of the same neural network. That is the thing they kind of glanced over in the first movie, but it is like, that's the whole design of this world. And so we already can take in what we know of whales in our world, which is that they are highly intelligent, highly loyal creatures, and they have family dynamics that are not that different from us. And we can implant that onto what is basically a whale with an extra set of eyes, right? And so I think that James Cameron's really good at taking that face value thing, and the whaling stuff is like, it's hard to watch. Like it is a difficult thing to watch. But I think he's able to do that face value thing of like, yeah, you're not going to look away from this, because this is me trying to point out to you that this is happening with us. And I think that like, as difficult as it is to watch, I think it's important that it's in there the way it is, instead of glancing over it, because it's like one of his whole stanzas for a long time is like, the first Avatar, he was told that like he needed to take out the hippy dippy environmentalism stuff. And he said, no, that's me. And that is my story. So the fact that he's like, now he has the, like, I mean, he already had fuck you money to do it before anyway, but like, especially now after the first movie's success, I think he's just like, nah, these are my movies. These are my stories. I'm going to make sure people see what's happening here in the story. And I appreciate that, just because it's like, sometimes you got to force people to wake them up, and it's hard, but yeah.
I mean, but we did get the revenge. We did get the revenge that was earned from that, with Payakun just annihilating the main whaler and taking an arm for an arm, a fin for an arm. So also, and like just so much damage. That was my favorite part, is that it wasn't like a one and done. He was just fucking shit up left and right. He was taking out things. He was slapping stuff. He was like contemplating. That was the Terminator.
Like that was the moment of the Terminator coming through. But that's the thing, is I really like with the whaler characters, like one of them took over that role of like generic, like, okay, this is just a bad guy. This guy fucking sucks. Can't wait to see him go. He had an
Australian accent, so he was like really hardcore.
Well, Sam Worthington still technically has a little of his Australian accent too, but not on purpose though.
It's a little bit like what's his name from Jurassic Park? The big game hunter. Right.
Well, I mean, that character in that, he's the only one that is like, dude, why are we doing this?
It's a little clever girl. And then we have Jermaine Clement as the complacent scientist.
Well, that's the thing is I like that we got like that super generic main bad guy for that, right? But I like that Jermaine Clement, weirdly American accent for some reason. But I like that they had him have just enough depth where it's like, yeah, that's believable. Where it's like, this isn't the thing he necessarily signed up for, but he's stuck here now doing it. And he's like, I drink myself to sleep every night. Like, there's just enough in there to be like, you're not a sympathetic character, but I get you a little bit more. As opposed to like, because you don't want to have two characters that are fully like, you know, we're just going to shred these whales apart. Because I think that would have been too much. Because like, just like the last movie, like you can have one, you can't really have two. But yeah, it's interesting. Like what I was talking about before, how it's sort of like two acts. It's almost like two movies, right? Where it's like, there's the whole whaling aspect of it that comes in. And I think that's the split from like when they first get to this area where it's all just like living with this culture again and all that stuff. And then as soon as like the whaling stuff comes into it, there's your second movie that is like balls to the wall classic James Cameron action movie. Like there are shots at the end of this movie that are straight out of Terminator 2. Like it is so good. Like the classic, like high contrast, dark, shadowy with the orange glow, like James Cameron doing that stuff cannot be topped. And like the end of this movie is just so exciting and such a fantastic use of just action to propel you. And then like the tense stuff with like and a
little Titanic just sprinkled, Titanic sprinkled on top with the ship sinking. A boat sinking, but the dynamics of how a boat sinks, how to get on top, when you get pulled under, like it was Titanic.
Hey, we stick together, we hold the hands together, like that stuff was completely from when the boat goes underwater fully. But like the oh no, I lost track of where I was going with that.
We're talking about the end scenes, very James Cameron.
But the
contrast shadows.
Yeah, I got past all that though. That's the tension of it's not just in the ending, it's also in when they're training to like understand how to be in the water. The way that James Cameron through his entire career has been able to have that tension of drowning is so tense, but like in this movie it happens multiple times and it hits every time where I'm just like, I'm holding my breath multiple times in this movie because a character is holding their breath and about to run out.
Like, or that feeling when your air pushes against your mouth because it wants to come out.
Yeah.
When you're trying, like, have you ever been underwater, like trying to swim to the top too long and have that like small moment
or just
of panic?
Just that thing where you're like, when you're a kid in the pool and you like hold yourself under on the side of the pool edge and stuff. Like it's kind of wild. Like you would think like that's one trick that he uses in this movie multiple times. You would think one of them wouldn't hit, but it hit every time. And it's like when Loak is being attacked by that one, like
the sturgeon. We'll call it the Pandora sturgeon.
the lead up to there's always a bigger fish. The Arapaima,
the river monster.
Yeah. So that whole sequence when he's like diving through the coral and like trying to avoid being eaten whole. That whole sequence when like it finally swims away and he's just like looking around like, I'm running out of breath. I need to get out of here soon. But if I get out of here soon, that thing is still around here, blah, blah, blah. It's that works. And then also the same thing works where there's no immediate threat of something eating other characters at the end when they're just in the hallways and it's flooding. Like it hits the same way on both of them. There's just this resounding terror in those moments. And especially since later on, like the younger kids are involved with it too. And it's, the whole like 2/3 in the back end of this movie is just like, that would have been a perfect movie for me. But like, there had to be a little bit of lead up. So it kind of like dips it down a little bit. But everything else, oh man, all of that.
The only thing that was in the back half of the movie, and I get like the family is the focus, is that the sea tribe comes to the rescue. They're like, nope, we're out. Like they killed our sisters and our brothers. They're like not about that whaling life. I mean, now that it's come closer to home, because apparently when it was out further in the ocean, that was cool. They knew it was happening, but it was like not a concern. Anyway, a little bit of a plot hole. But then they just kind of disappeared.
I think that that's believable. I think that
I know
you don't like in particularly American culture, like if you don't see it, it's not happening. So like that's the thing, is like that's modern day with social media and the news actually covering like abominations of stuff like that.
Yeah, but like they knew it enough to like be mad about Pilo Kun breaking his oath to not kill people by leading an insurgency against the whalers. Like they knew his whole story, and they're like, oh no, he's like no good. He broke his oath. He got everyone killed when he tried to take on the whalers head on. They made a pact they weren't going to do that, but they knew all that. So they knew that was going on.
I don't think they knew all that. I think that they thought he attacked the other whales.
But like, so Matthew and I were actually debating this on whether or not they knew that, because it wasn't like his decision was one of violence that they chose not to do, because at some point they say it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that what he did was still wrong. Like it doesn't. Yeah. Was his decision.
That's true.
So they know.
I think when Loak is having the conversation with the chieftain, though, he's basically saying like, no, you don't understand what happened. That's when he was trying to say like he was going after other people, but they never let him say he was going after other people. So I don't think they actually ever tried to talk to this one whale. I think that they just assumed that he went after the other whales, and because they said he's a killer. So like, I think that they made the assumption that he was like going after, because that's the whole reason why the other kids think it's dangerous for Loak to go out, because he killed his own. So like, I think you're not wrong that like this all could have been solved by them trying to talk to him. But like, I think that it is a slightly more complicated thing than like they knew he attacked the ship. Because I don't think he was attacking the ship. I think he was. No,
he got all the other bulls together.
Right.
And Na'vi. They were a united force to take on these whalers, because he saw them. They murdered his mom. That was like the whole thing, and like relatable. And we see that happen to a different one. But they end up all getting taken out, because obviously they were ill prepared for the weapons that they have on board. And then he basically gets everybody killed, but they were going for blood. And I thought that was the point where it's like when Loak's trying to explain to Jake, like, no, like this is what happens. Like, it doesn't matter. He broke the oath. Right. We're going for blood.
Yeah.
He brought others involved, which makes it even worse. And it parallels the way that Loak makes decisions that end up getting his brother killed. Right.
And I do.
He's like, hey, everyone, let's go.
Yeah. I see it.
See you.
I see it slightly differently than you do in that, but I think you are 100% right that like a different solution could have been found to clear up the air. Like
but I think that was part of their parallel, is that both of them had made
rash decisions
that seemed right at the time, that were made in good faith, right? So, Loak is wanting to save Spider, because that's his bro right there, and he's one, and then Pilo Kun wants to, stop the whalers from murdering everyone. Valid decisions, but they were ill-informed, and then they ended up getting people killed.
Yeah, it's that. I think that stuff could have been a little bit clearer in this whole section, but for the most part, I think everything else in the movie is more straightforward. So like, to go back on the whole, like, if we need to pay attention or whatever, like, this is sort of like the only time that I think that comes up, because everything else is just like, there's a chosen one child, there is a family that is going to a different region, and then action. That's pretty much it.
Well, like, I like the contrast between, like, we always thought Jake was the chosen one, but really he was a blank slate.
Yeah.
Right? He was like moldable, where Kiri / Grace was more of the connected being. Like, I wouldn't say that Jake is like the connected being.
No.
But he was able to be infused with knowledge because there was nothing going on.
He's the King Arthur character, where she's actually like chosen by the world. And there's a big difference of like being a character that can inspire others and being a character that is already connected to them. So yeah.
Which is sometimes tougher. Although I will say the only one of the other parts I didn't like is when she randomly had a seizure, when she was like connected to their like tree of life underwater. And, you know, that's the catalyst for them being found out, because they fly in and they, you know, Norm's trying to like make sure she's okay. And then that ends up not doing anything. And it's just like, well, why did you have to do that and like write off her visions as epilepsy?
Well, I think that's showing the difference between, you know, the human side of Jake and the Na'vi side, where it's like, it's showing you the science versus faith aspect of things. And that's a tough thing to convey for any movie, particularly like a movie that has deep sort of concepts, but maybe isn't, you know, the deepest in how it's delivered. But like, I think that I like that they tried to show a little bit of that, of like, is it one side or the other? And no, they never actually explain that it's one side or the other in the end. They just say it's like, you know, it's a bit of both. Because she's going to have this connection to everything. It's probably not going to stop her. So we can see in the next movie if they connect it to more of like, no, never mind that epilepsy thing or whatever. But like, I do like that they tried to show like a human explanation for it versus, you know, actual chosen one iconography and stuff. So, because I
we'll
just
see what happens.
Yeah,
because it's clear that they wrote them together, right? And the way that this movie ends.
Well, this was only supposed to be the first half of this movie.
Yeah, so we know that like the way that it ends is like the next part is going to be a continuation. Yeah,
I'm curious where it goes from here in terms of like how like anime generational it gets. Because like we've now, like, with the 16 years that have passed in real time, or 13 years, but like we have about that same time period in the movie. I'm wondering how far of a jump we're going to see in the next couple movies, where it's like, is it going to be like the kids are the adults by the time we get to the fifth movie? Because
maybe
if we even
not in the next one. I think the next one's just gonna pick up where this one left off, but then where do we go from there?
That's the thing, is I don't know. I could see them still doing like a 10-year jump after this, because that's like the same thing with like the end of the last movie, where it's just like they're gone. The amount of time it takes for them to come back again is gonna be a while. So like,
well, and this time they didn't leave though.
That's
right?
true.
And
Yeah, they still have the nanobot built warehouse. Yeah.
And then that's the whole point, is that they're trying to terraform and colonize Pandora for humans, versus running a mining operation like the last one. So it's not just like a collection. They're actually trying to make this home now. Yeah. So
James Cameron did say,
which is a better way. That makes more sense.
There's also there was supposed to be a space battle in this movie, which I'm glad they didn't go that far with it yet. But James Cameron did say that like by the fourth or fifth movie, they're going back to Earth. So like it's gonna get real like Halo 2 style. But it's I'm really curious to see how those things go, because like, as much as yes, there is space travel, I don't consider these movies sci-fi as much as I do fantasy.
Yeah, I can
particularly
see that.
This one though, because it's
especially with the focus more on like the creatures in the world versus like what's going on out in the stars.
Yeah, like the science fiction side of it is like a fraction of it compared to, you know, the actual living, breathing aspect of it. So it's I'm curious where that balance will come out, because like if you're going back to Earth, that means you're going to have a lot more sci-fi introduced to it, because you have to show that travel. You have to show like, is one of these movies going to be just on a ship? Like, at some point there's going to be like, I guess maybe they capture Jake and the family and bring them back, and that would be like, okay, we froze them. But like, and then the other thing is like Quaritch, like I have this feeling that they'll probably do the generic, which is totally fine, like generic thing with the bad guy turned like Uneasy Alliance turned good guy. And I could see him.
That especially now he's connected, that's going to have an impact.
Yeah.
Also, we got rid of like all the other ones, so he's kind of like the last one.
Yeah. The last of his kind.
I'm pretty sure everyone else was like murdered, but I wonder if they will bring him back though to Earth, to your point, because they did make a big deal about who can breathe what air.
Yeah.
Right. And so that, which we did not really see in the last film, it was more like humans can't breathe the air on Pandora and they needed the mask. Now we're seeing the opposite. And that could be a potential setup to more Na'vi being in human spaces.
Yeah. And part of that also set up just the water aspect, where they were saying like, and you can come into our air and breathe it for hours. But you know, I can't do the same. And that was the plight of Spider. But yeah, it's, I'm just curious to see how they pay off these setups, because like we have said, a lot of the stuff is sort of like surface level explanation stuff. And I think the payoff for that, you're going to have to build up a little bit more once we get further into this. This is basically doing another first movie. So like you can get away with it. But I think once you get to the next movie and like the following ones after that, you have to start doing that world building in a little bit more organic detail, as opposed to just like, here's a 5-minute exposition dump, go for it. Yeah.
But it'd be interesting to see. I mean, I feel like this was almost like a recap in a way of the last one, because it hits a lot of the same notes. But so I'm really interested to see where they go with it, to your point, and how they build upon the foundation that we have now. Because now we have a very stable foundation. We understand this world, how it works, you know, why it's important. And so now we can go a little bit deeper.
Yeah. The first movie was about spectacle of like, look at this crazy planet.
Look what we can do.
And then this one was actually like really about existing in this world and building up characters that we can actually care about outside of 2 people. So yeah. Well, I think that'll probably round up where we're at on Avatar. We won't go for the full 3 hours and 12 minutes that the movie did. But yeah, thanks for coming back on, as always. And yeah, until next time, bye.
Bye.